We're living through a time of profound technological transformation. I mean, even the idea of normal is being redefined in real time. Yet there's also so much possibility in this moment. We've got decentralized financial technologies making it possible to circulate money without predatory middlemen and central banking systems. The 3D printed affordable housing made completely out of sustainable bio-based materials. A video game that makes censored journalism available all over the world. Communities building their own internet networks. Technology that's developing biodegradable alternatives to plastic. These are some of many incredible examples out there. We have all the solutions we need to start making a difference. So why don't we? Well, most of us know this, that we live in a system that rewards extraction to take as much as possible, with little regard for the harm left behind. And then there's no system of accountability when our elected officials have financial ties to the very tech industries they're supposed to regulate. We're told that AI is going to come take our jobs or maybe even take over the world. I think that the deeper danger is who's building these technologies, what agendas they serve, and who stands to profit. And it seems that we'd rather be fighting each other over identity politics rather than actually looking at this whole system we live in together. For example, we're entering this whole new era of high-tech militarized policing, which is connected to a total opaque surveillance machine where websites and data brokers, Google and advertisers, they all track what we search, what we read, what we buy, how we even feel, our health concerns, details about our financial and romantic lives. And all of this sensitive data gets sold to thousands of companies that we've never even heard of. And there's nothing stopping intelligence, law enforcement, political groups, and other shady actors from using this data for their own agendas. But something that really strikes me is technology is creating a whole new class of traumatic human experience. For example, if you own a smartphone, gaming console, or a computer, there's a good chance it passed through a Foxconn factory. And the workers at Foxconn, the majority of them migrant laborers with no real social safety net, they're faced with working conditions that have been so exploitative and abusive that Foxconn had to install 1.5 million square meters of nets to prevent the growing number of suicides at one of its factories. I think of the thousands of human moderators all over the world who are employed by social media platforms, who spend every day reviewing some of the most disturbing content online so that we don't have to see it. We're talking daily exposure to beheadings, child abuse materials, suicide videos, mass killings. Facebook had to pay a settlement worth $52 million to moderators because of the enormous PTSD, and in Africa they're organizing to create a union to protect the workers from such traumatizing work. We've also done a lot of reporting on the countless murders of innocent people globally from drone strikes, and all the suicides and severe traumas of military drone operators who are forced to carry out killings ordered by people above, like top generals or the CIA or secret special ops units. And they have to watch themselves kill children, or kill animals, or kill people that actually turned out to be innocent in the end. We've got this whole news database of all topics related to technology, from technology for good to wireless radiation health concerns, big tech and censorship issues, AI, biotech, and emerging warfare technologies, and so much more. So check it out. I always love to say that we can't shift the chaos we're in until we name it clearly. How do we hold complexity and darkness without collapsing into despair or exhaustion? So that's why I met up with two people who are also really aligned and making sense of these times without all the noisy polarization and us versus them thinking we see everywhere. So at the heart of this conversation that you're about to watch is what needs to be acknowledged healed, or transformed in our relationship with technology. So I'm with Joe Martino, who's the founder of Collective Evolution and the conscious magazine called The Pulse. And Joe's really been at the forefront of conscious media, bringing together the best of thinking in the fields of science, ancient wisdom, individual transformation, and societal change. And also joining me is Want to Know news editor Mark Bailey, who is a science fiction writer, futurist, and founder of Our Story, a decentralized and censorship-proof media network built on the blockchain. The goal of this talk isn't to find the answers or to have the strongest stances even, but to really slow things down and start asking deeper questions about what would real transformation look like. Mark and Joe, thanks to both of you for being here with me today. We're here to hold space for a nuanced conversation about technology. So one thing technology has stirred in me is how do we engage with the world in a way that honors the full complexity and wholeness of any person, topic, or issue, right? Like, how do we step into complexity? That we're living in this multi-dimensional, interconnected world. So we welcome anyone, no matter who you are, to join us in this conversation, to move beyond black or white, right or wrong, left versus blue. So let's start off with hearing from you two about a moment in your life where technology has transformed you, for better or for worse.
Back in 2014, I was tracking this whole Bitcoin thing and watching people start to use Bitcoin and all that. And then in 2014, the US government started auctioning off Bitcoin they had seized from a website called Silk Road. And so at that moment, I knew that whatever else it was, this Bitcoin thing was being viewed as legitimate by the US government. And I thought, oh wow, things are really going to change. Bought my first Bitcoin in 2014 and I dove into that world.
What do you think the crypto world, the blockchain world can offer to society right now?
I mean, disintermediated economic activity, an economy that's not held hostage by middlemen.
The Bitcoin and WikiLeaks relationship that emerged when the US government shut down PayPal and other forms of payment so that people could directly support WikiLeaks. They turned to Bitcoin, who is now storing a lot of the documents that WikiLeaks uncovered on the blockchain, right? And it can't be tampered with, it can't be messed with at all.
That is one of the best uses of blockchain. All it really is universal truth that everyone in the network agrees on. And so if you have a document that's contentious, that someone might have motivation to tamper with, you put it on a blockchain, it can't be tampered with by anyone, and then everyone has a universal truth to reference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good for government sort of declassified databases of documents, which can, kind of just, if people who've done the research, you'll know that oftentimes documents just disappear or are updated or, hey, what the heck happened to that, And
right.
That'd be cool. What's here right now is just I think back to, 2009 area, somewhere in that range. It probably actually kind of started in 2008 for me. And really just, I would say, using the internet specifically and social media to learn different things and then share those different things with people. And while here in 2025, it seems like, oh my God, information spreads online so fast, it's easy to forget that just, 15, 16 years ago, it wasn't that fast. There wasn't whole economies built around this sharing of information, and therefore things were just different. The infrastructure wasn't even as strong. But that moment changed everything for me because, obviously it was a big part of what ended up becoming my life's work, but it was kind of the first way I was able to connect deeply with a lot of people about ideas that were very contrary, at least in exploration, to the mainstream sort of consensus or view. And it gave me this opportunity to go, oh my gosh, there's so many other people that are sensing and feeling that something's not quite right. And because we can communicate, there was now a sense of like, okay, these ideas could build. And, that fueled so much of what I did over the next while. But that I think was a powerful moment.
We all know that there are so many gifts that have come from this digital tech world. I mean, I started shuffle dancing during the pandemic, watching these incredible shufflers all over the world online and just feeling so inspired and connected to their joy and their embodiment. I'm like, I want to try this. And just posting my own video and tagging them and them seeing it and feeling like I was connected to this global society. We'll be talking about the ramifications of our national security state becoming more tech oriented, but there's also this social media phenomenon happening right now. As you both know, I worked at a high school before, during, and after COVID, and I saw the direct impact of social media and excessive tech use. You know, kids unable to make eye contact. The only way they could self-soothe was just literally the mechanism of scrolling. Like it didn't even matter what they were looking at. They just had to like be in that action. Just groups of kids, like lunch, so quiet, like groups of kids together, but then they're just like, and their necks are like that, and like just totally quiet. You know, and going into classrooms where no one's talking, everyone's on their computer, like language classes, like the Spanish classes. Kids would create social media platforms of, ooh, look at what this kid looks like without their mask. And then everyone would come and be like, oh, that person looks like a pig. Anytime you share a story or a regular post on Instagram or TikTok, you can add these beauty filters that take away your blemishes, make your eyes look bigger, puff your lips a little bit more. And I had kids who couldn't even take a selfie without using these filters. Actually, a lot of them. It was like the norm. And we know that Facebook's own internal research found that their platforms, especially Instagram, were increasing suicidal thoughts, self-harm, eating disorders, body image issues. Like CBS News interviewed a bunch of kids about social media, and one of them, it like broke my heart. I was watching this video and he was like, wow, you know, just the people online, they just seem like they have such the perfect life. And compared to me, I'm a nobody. And it's just like, I felt that in my soul when he said that. John Vervaeke, he's a cognitive scientist and psychologist. He cited a UK survey that showed that 89% of 16 to 25-year-olds in the UK say their life lacks meaning. Studies are finding that prison inmates are spending more time outside than kids. So kids aren't getting out, and they're not finding that in-person relationship with others and the natural world. So where do we find meaning when we're outsourcing our social emotional lives to these machines? That the places and practices that used to bind us, like shared meals, civic commons, community rituals, they're all being replaced by solitary digital consumption right now. And so obviously this has great impact on the polarizing social climate we live in, where we've got these engineered media narratives that are fragmenting our sense of reality. They're driving us apart. And the algorithmic echo chambers that show up on social media and on Google that discourage viewpoint diversity and amplify extremes. And all of this triggers strong emotions in us. And we're drawn to that. So we keep watching, clicking, and sharing. And then those types of narratives get pushed to the top because attention equals profit. So how about you two? What do you see we are at now with technology?
We already have the tech that we need to create a much more free and a much more fair society. What we don't have are incentive structures that make people want to actually do that.
As a person who always likes to look at the underlying drivers, or you could say sometimes just the consciousness of the way we're doing things in our world, like what is driving us, what is our thinking, what is our worldview, how then does that become our value systems and thus our choices and so on and so forth. I've just been thinking about this in the last year and a half a lot, as technology being literally like perhaps the most important linchpin to discuss within society. It is literally the thing that is almost like gluing our lives together in like every way, shape, or form. And if we can speak there and we can look at it from the standpoint of the other really important thing that you said, which is we already have all the solutions, right? Like when we're thinking about something like, for example, CO2, right? And you know, there's this whole narrative that CO2 is, you know, basically killing everybody and the planet. I don't personally believe the narrative as is, but let's play with the idea, because obviously society is run in many ways by this narrative being a very, very powerful force. all of the solutions to quote unquote just annex CO2 and the amount that we're putting it out there already exist. What doesn't exist is a system that's flexible enough that would allow for all of these solutions to come into being. So here we are as a society fighting over all of these things and trying to come up with all these policies and all these, how do we do this? How do we do that? Look, that country's bad because they don't want to do what all of us want to do. And this person's bad. And we get into all this stuff, avoiding the truth of the matter, which is that, like you pointed out, we've set up systems of incentive, system design, market economies that literally don't allow for the innovation that we actually have. And it doesn't allow for the freedom that we could experience. So much is going to be happening to us because, as we know, the way our systems function is they force things upon people in many ways, right? It's like adopt this or you lose. I can hear the people disagreeing with me. It's like, oh, well, you could go and just kind of live off grid and do your own thing. And you don't need technology. And it's like, yeah, but what about the other 7 billion people that can't afford to even do that or have no possibility to do that, right? I'm in this for the collective, not the individual. So, I kind of look at it that way.
What are the technologies out there that you think could really radically transform society that aren't being talked about much?
The easy ones are biochar, which can sink carbon, and there are big biochar projects going on. But I feel like the biggest one is also the most boring, which is transforming our land use and city planning and zoning and all that stuff to, we could probably cut 90% of car travel in 10 years if we changed how we organize ourselves on the physical world, like in the United States. And when you start to, just say land use or city planning, and immediately people fall asleep.
Mark, I agree. City planning and being able to better design the way we build our cities, for example, which right now I think is primarily in alignment with profit maximization and just commerce, as opposed to even something like quality of life, which I think is important in this entire conversation because we are building market-centric, let's just say everything, in society and not really considering the ways in which all of it is having an impact on human resilience. It becomes much less possible to have agency when our resilience is continually declining. Energy is something that drives, almost the vast majority of everything, right? Whether it's heating and cooling and food production. I've stood in front of technologies, which I signed an NDA to not be able to really talk much about. But what I can say is that, they don't require much of anything at all. You're talking about the one I witnessed was a 2 kilowatt output, which I would say for the average North American home, you could essentially put one in between 2 homes and it would run both those homes, no problem, like not even bat an eyelash, it'd be totally fine. They can connect in series and you can scale these things up. They were doing essentially megawatt connections or versions of these technologies. And they don't require anything. So they're, without saying too much, it's like, once you get them going, they kind of just go. And they're totally safe. Like they're not dangerous at all. There's no chance for some sort of nuclear something or other, or there's no chance for some electromagnetic huge issue that could cause a massive problem, right? As we often hear. And the maintenance is like once every 5 years. So you would have to literally lube a spindle once every 5 years. And the actual workings of the technology, so the part that's relevant to sort of making it all work, the estimation was that the part would essentially last about 1,000 years, and that was their estimation, right? And so you're talking about an energy technology that, if you remember during COVID when we said, oh, hey, we need ventilators and let's take all of these manufacturing facilities and get them to start making ventilators because we need them, right? That was an example of humanity can solve problems that they perceive are there. They can solve them quickly if they put their resources in one area, right? This technology that I'm talking about, we could have that same outcome. We could say, okay, let's get all of these different places. Let's open source the plans on how to build this thing. Let's get all of these places, producing this energy technology. And you could probably produce enough for, an entire country. And this technology has been around in this iteration for at least 20 years already. I have a friend who spent a lot of years vetting energy technologies. That was her job. She went around to technologies all around the world, and she said about 5% of them actually work. And the 5% that work are they're groundbreaking. It just completely disruptive to everything we know about technology. And when it comes to energy production,
we've got a whole news category about energy breakthroughs and the history of how a lot of these breakthroughs have been suppressed. People have been threatened. People have found different ways to power cars that have nothing to do with the fossil fuel industry.
15 years ago, I knew a guy who was running his car, it was a BMW, off of hydrogen. There was a very minor modification required in the car. He literally had a mason jar a little bigger than this in the front of his car. And through the process of electrolysis and the way that they timed the engine, he was running his car off of nothing more than just tap water. And he was okay to do that providing he didn't tell anybody. This is what he was told. The point I'm trying to make is for the longest time that was, oh yeah, there's no way, that's not possible. What have you been seeing for the last year everywhere? Hydrogen cars are the next thing. Hydrogen cars, it's hydrogen cars. We're going to be hydrogen cars, right? So the thing that everybody was ridiculed for and saying this is ridiculous, there's no way this could work, this is impossible, blah, 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 blah. Now we're taking the same technology, we're sort of, scaling it up into more commercial versions of it. So we're not getting mass adoption here. We're not getting mass exposure. And then it'll trickle and you'll start to get eventually some consumer models that are, running on hydrogen. But again, how will the market almost, that meme where the kid's riding the bike and then he has a stick in his hand and then he puts the stick in his own bike and then flips himself off the bike. And it's like that 3-tier meme. And the question is what is the market going to do to put a stick in the wheel in order to not disrupt too fast the fossil fuel industry and the EV market and all this stuff, right? And this has been like this for decades where, slow down on efficiency there. You can't do that, right? A Toyota built in North America and a Toyota built in Europe have two different government regulated efficiency limitations, like, hey, you can't make a car that is more efficient than this, right? Because they're protecting their oil investments. So when people understand that we're literally creating our own scarcity, we're creating our own limitations to uphold the existing systems, it just all goes back to the same thing, right? It's like we're always getting in our own way just to not disrupt the economy that we know of today, right? Just that hydrogen car point, this has been around for 50 plus years. And we're going to pretend now that, oh yeah, no, we finally, figured this out.
Investigation and innovation has really been, stymied in an organic way because, things can't be too efficient for sure. The Defense Department actually has the right to take control of any patents of energy technologies that are too efficient.
Yeah.
Because they could also have military applications in theory.
There is always a somewhat reasonable argument where they could say, well, it is dangerous to have this, or, this could be used. And it's like, yeah, I don't disagree with that. Imagine if they found out, oh, this is a little dangerous. Okay, so refine it, make it not dangerous, right? But instead we just keep doing what we're doing. And this is why I think it's extremely disingenuous of governments to claim hey, we don't really have any solutions, because it's just not true.
I mean, engineered obsolescence in a company will make something poorly intentionally so that it breaks down and has a shorter life cycle, which prompts consumers to buy more of it. And our entire economy is dripping with engineered obsolescence.
Yeah.
And it just keeps making everything worse. And we keep saying, oh, we've got these great new technologies, but then, like, what's the lifespan of a cell phone? What's the lifespan of a laptop? The lifespan of both of them should be 30 years. There is no reason, no legitimate reason why it should be any less than that. If you say maybe battery replaced every 5 years, okay. That is true throughout our whole economy. I mean, I have to buy a new coffee maker once every 18 months. And so wasteful and such a drain on all of our resources. Some significant percentage of all of our incomes would be retained by us if we didn't have to spend it on replacing products that continually break down because they were designed to break down, not to function.
Agreed. And, oftentimes the general public will say it's because Apple and these other companies that are producing these technologies, they're just greedy and they're evil and they're this. And it's like, well, you look bigger and you go, well, okay, so they need to constantly be making profit because they're a public company, because they exist in this, again, in the market economy, the way that it functions today. And they constantly, they literally project their futures and what they're going to invest in based on this engineered obsolescence and so on and so forth. And the crazy part is, it's like, if they don't do it, if they don't keep up with the engineered obsolescence game, then somebody else will, and they'll start to lose their market share and they'll start to lose their power and their control as a company, right? And this is kind of the ways in which, again, this culture of sort of complexity, this culture of being able to understand more deeply how our world works, is so important for it to happen culturally, because most people have shut off their curiosity by saying, well, X corporation is evil, and there's my answer, right? Once I know that, I'm good, right? Bill Gates, he's evil, or that person, evil, right? And so I think that was good, or maybe useful, because everything always, kind of has its purpose in staging up our understanding and leveling up our understanding of things. And I think that was a very relevant position maybe to hold back in 2012, 13, 14, that kind of thing. But I think we're really being challenged on an informational level at this point. And this kind of goes back a little bit of a tie-in of the media observations. Back in those years I mentioned, 2012, 13, 14, 15, there wasn't a lot of people that were, let's say, having discussions about the way our world works and what's going on with corruption and alternative narratives and all these different things. There wasn't tons and tons of people doing that. There were people doing it, but it wasn't like it is today. Today, it's just everywhere. Like, everybody is talking about it. And so that suggests a certain threshold of understanding, right? There's a certain threshold of understanding and there's a certain threshold of audience that's there. And so there is something next that sort of needs to happen. That was that stage. That stage has reached a threshold, and now it's understanding things more deeply. And I truly believe this is what's next, because this is what will pull people out of this. No, but it just comes down to Trump or whoever is he's against in that any particular election or whatever it might be. It pulls people out of the political ideology and into a deeper understanding of what's driving the systems and what's going on. I think that's where we find freedom, ultimately, to be able to choose something different.
It reminds me of this Joseph Campbell quote. He said, revolution doesn't have to do with smashing something. It has to do with bringing something forth. If you spend all your time thinking about that which you are attacking, then you are negatively bound to it. A lot of my awakening as a media activist was in solutions journalism. A lot of it had to do with technology. I was learning about communities building their own internet networks through electric cooperatives in the country. And I was learning about really fascinating circular economy solutions, like dead electric car batteries powering cities that, oh my God, there's actually a lot of energy left in these batteries and we're just throwing it away. The whole idea that countries are borrowing garbage from other countries because they're able to convert it into a national heating network for their people. I always love to talk about the decentralized social media platform in Taiwan that allows people to directly share their views with politicians, and those comments would be organized by ones that are most consensus oriented, and they were able to find where most people agree on lots of different issues within weeks. Dozens of laws have been passed based on this format. I just saw a news article about how, like, the Taiwan parliament, they just had a huge eruption and ended in fistfights again. So it's not going to be perfect, right? It's not like we're saying that these solutions are going to change everything and everything's going to be better. Yet somehow I really do feel like technology is such a gateway to what's possible.
V Taiwan is the name of the project there. I also think it's a fascinating project, and I think that the ways in which it's all open source, so you can see exactly the ways in which they have done it. What's powerful about it is they've solved for one of the most difficult aspects of any quote unquote democracy, which is people, if they're not informed totally about an issue, the say that they might have, or their vote may hold less weight because they don't really understand what it is that they're voting on, and what's actually at stake. And I mean, this is a huge problem. Look at the way we're making sense of politics. We literally have people living in completely different worlds, yet they're in the same town because of the ways in which their perspective about what's happening is just not, it's not the same, right? We're being given just a small amount of the facts. And so V Taiwan has kind of tried to solve for that by creating these sessions where they actually inform people on the total ways in which we can look at something. And so that's a really interesting thing. Again, I think this is a great smaller scale solution that can be repeated like everywhere. And so the point here is you might be really inspired by it and want to try it in like your local town or something like that.
Absolutely. When we're talking about technological breakthroughs, I think this is really at the core of the UFO disclosure movement. Like, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, do aliens exist? Maybe. And I think that is such a superficial perspective on why there's this unprecedented disclosure movement where whistleblowers are coming out, there's legal action being taken. It's literally bringing lawmakers from both sides of the aisle together to be like, hey, we want to know what's going on and what secret elements in the government know. But everything I've researched, so much of it has to do with what are the technologies behind maybe some secret programs where we've recovered craft, where we've learned that there might be some certain devices from non-human origin that could actually radically transform society. And there are people, there are scientists like the Skunkworks guy, Don Phillips. He said, as part of the Disclosure Project with Stephen Greer, that he's like, we've got devices that could detect cancer and even cure cancer. We've got technologies that could really like radically change how we use energy. The fossil fuel industry would become irrelevant, that we would be so less dependent on these big systems that are extracting from Earth and all of us. A lot of the race right now are maybe private aerospace companies or elites that are rushing to patent these technologies, so that if it does get released, which I think eventually a lot of the material is going to come out, we're moving towards disclosure. There's really nothing that elites can do to stop it. That right now they're working really hard to privatize a lot of this information, and that's why there's this move towards UFO disclosures.
I guess one thing I want to bring into the conversation is the idea of accountability. And specifically, like, we have a system where bad actors are not accountable for their actions. We can say, oh, there's legal accountability, there's liability, there's a court system, etc. But all those games are rigged. One of the great promises of, like, the network technology, the phones, the web, all that stuff, is that it allows us to get together with each other and start holding these bad actors accountable wherever they show up. I think we're taking baby steps as a society towards that, and some of them are really, really messy. Like the United Health guy getting murdered in Manhattan. I don't think that's the last that we're going to see of that kind of thing. I think that's the very beginning of a big wave of people attempting in an immature way to actually hold wrongdoers accountable for their actions. And we all evolved in tribal societies where everyone was accountable to everyone else in the village. And
Mhm.
so it's super new and super weird for us as humans to just not have that piece, to have there be able to be these secret actors who do these terrible things. The big first problem is the secrecy. You know, everything is secret, and then you get in trouble if you spill the secret. And so I mean, all that stuff I think is eventually going to go out the window because the future is radically transparent whether we like it or not. So the question is, how do we want to harness that? Do we want to make it a thing that, like you say, is done to us, or that we can take control of and use for social benefit?
Journalist Keenan Malik, who has studied AI and is saying that the society and media pumps us up with so much fear about AI and it distracts people from the real purveyors of harm, which is the humans and the corporations that created and trained these models. And so too often when we talk about AI, we remove the human from the picture, we externalize it. And when we do that, we see humans as victims of machines. And it's a perfect narrative for power players to come in and say, hey, we can protect you from these machines. And so he says that it's not AI, but our blindness to the way human societies are already deploying machine intelligence for political ends that should most worry us. And so when we talk about real accountability, well, we need to know what is going on, what's shaping the narratives we see. A lot of people are noticing that in the national security state, there's a lot of big changes right now. Since 9/11, defense contractors have played an increasingly large role. Traditionally, it's always been the big five, right? Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. And these big players are now being replaced by this new elite faction of these venture capitalist funded tech giants led by billionaires. I did some looking into John Ratcliffe, the current CIA director under Trump. He was formerly the director of national intelligence. After he left office as the director of national intelligence, he worked for AI startups, focusing on drones, wartime surveillance, and brain computer interfaces. So right now, DARPA, Pentagon's technological research arm, is backing tons of neural warfare programs where they're learning how do you manipulate memories and emotions? How do you conduct surveillance? And even pave the way for new forms of psychological torture. Because if you're literally manipulating brainwaves, you could do a lot of things to the human body. I always like to think of the cybersecurity risk too. Like humans might even just become as hackable as our smartphones. Kind of trippy to think about. And so now you've got dozens of former Pentagon officials, including ex-defense secretaries, senior officers, now working for this whole defense-focused venture capital tech industry. The CIA and other top military officials have admitted that drone strikes and targeted killings actually create more terrorists than they stop. It boosts extremism. You've got the pro-tech, pro-war narratives. The first AI warfare conference last year, the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, said that the peace activists, the campus protesters right now, they're the war activists, we're the peace activists. And he compared AI warfare to the development of the atomic bomb. You know, it's like this historic leap in warfare technologies. And from this worldview, if systems fail, it just means you need newer and better technology and more of it. So that's one perspective. And then you've got the mainstream progressives who are just beginning to notice this growing alliance. Like, I've been talking about Palantir for a while, and people are like, And then now they're like, Palantir, Palantir, because they're associated with Trump and Musk. So many people are reducing this issue to a Trump or Musk problem. These systems would likely continue expanding no matter who holds office. And then lastly, you've got the other side. You've got corners of the alternative media that veer into portraying tech as this fast track to, an AI powered surveillance state, corporate dictatorship where tech billionaires are going to rule the world. So we've got all these different narratives. What are your thoughts on all of this? Like, where is maybe the seeds of truth in all of these views?
When you look at whether it was the big five of the previous companies or whether it's SpaceX or even Palantir here, they buy themselves the guarantee, right? And how do they buy themselves the guarantee? They get in bed with government. And why do they do that? Well, because the more wealth you can acquire, the more power that you can acquire, the better, right? And again, to Elon and Peter Thiel, that is, all these different people, if I'm not going to be the one to amass all the power in the economy, in the market, the way it functions today, then somebody else will. And I want to be the one with all the power. Even if there was accountability, there's still going to be this massive incentive to say, I got to be the one with the power. And so I'm going to do the government contract, because the deeper I'm in bed with the government, the harder it is for them to take down my technology, because who's going to take down, let's say, Starlink, if it's deeply integrated with a surveillance system, right? That the government relies upon for their FBI, their CIA. Let's culturally be better at how we converse about these issues that we feel we're powerless to. Make it less about, hey, Elon and Peter and Bill Gates, all these people are just pieces of shit, and make it more about, here's what they're doing, here's what we can, how we can converse about it intelligently. And maybe this builds a movement. One thing I did want to say, and I know this sounds like another one of those like, trust me, bro type stories, but I'll say it anyway, is it's like, I had a friend, well, I still have a friend, he's still, he's still my friend, but in 2019, I mean, he kind of hangs out in some crypto and entrepreneurial circles, and he's just one of those people that somehow gets access to things. It just happens. So he paid a very large sum of money that he could afford to sort of be part of this internal group of like, here's what's going to happen in crypto. And I mean, this guy's made millions off of this group because they know what's going to happen in crypto all the time. How do they know? It's like any market, it's not a pure market. The point was that the guy who runs the group has access to what he kind of described as like the people who are kind of, that really have their hands on the lever in that transnational sort of mafia-like control of what happens in many aspects of the world. And it's not to say that these, let's say 10 or 15 groups of people are controlling every single detail of the world. It's more so that they have an incredible amount of influence. And that incredible amount of influence decides, the directions of certain markets. It decides, the directions of certain countries. And we're talking, they think hundreds of years at a time. And we're looking at the direction of technology, the direction of mass adoption of certain things like crypto. Like, so for example, within this group of 10 or 15 people, I don't know the number, but I know it's within that range. These 10 or 15 special interest groups, a good chunk of them wanted to axe crypto years ago. They just wanted to shut her down completely because they felt like it was going to be something that was going to get out of control. And then there was a whole other group of the people that were saying, no, we got to keep it going because we've actually put too many of our assets in at this point. And if we were to agree to all axe this thing, we would lose way too many of our holdings, right? And these are the actual richest people in the world, not the Bezos and the Elon Musks and these sorts of people, right? And no, these groups are not all Jewish. They're from, they're from all different parts of the world, right? And so the general point was that, this guy had access to sort of what these groups talk about. And then he was sharing this with the crypto group such that this crypto group could intelligently invest and know which way the markets were going to go all the time and make money almost, it was something like 85% accuracy. They were always making money. And the craziest part of it is they were told, hey, there's a virus coming in 2020. And this virus is not going to be super deadly. It's going to be something like they weren't sure of every single detail, but they said that this was in the works. It was coming. And it was going to come around 2020, and they said, all we know is that ivermectin will work against it to some extent, and that it's a good idea to have PPE masks, like N95 masks, very specifically N95 masks. So my buddy goes to the local Home Depot in 2019 and buys like all the N95 masks that they had. And, he believed it, right? Because this group had been so accurate. And he bought some ivermectin from, I think it was South America at the time. And sure enough, we all know that thing that happened in 2020. And so, I look at that story and I have to integrate that into my understanding of the world. Do you know what I'm saying? I either choose to take that story and say, well, this was a complete lie. It was a fabrication. And I just throw it away. Or I say, well, if that story is true, I have to integrate that. And if I have to integrate that, it means that somewhere within my worldview of how the world functions, there are groups of powerful forces that have that transnational level of power that don't always agree with each other, that sometimes war with each other. There are power struggles, but they generally try to collaborate, and they can make massive things happen. So when I think of world power and when I think of just how things function, that's how I think it looks, as opposed to, let's say, David Icke's perspective is like, hey, there's just one monolithic like group of power that is like controlling everything.
I've met a lot of different kinds of people in my life, and there are definitely powers that they're all behind the scenes that are moving and shaping things, and they always seem to know in advance when something big is going to happen. Some combination of human consciousness and predictive analysis is used to determine what events are the most likely to happen. And then when enough arrows point in a certain direction, then that's what they start planning for. Which leads into the empowering piece of it, is like, if that is possible, it's also probably possible for us to figure out with each other how to tap into our own consciousness and predictive analysis to get a better sense of where all the arrows are pointing, to make better plans, or possibly even steer the rudder a little bit here and there.
I've made several attempts at trying to write essays exploring this question. And the thing that I often come closest to is that consciousness impacts reality to some extent. And what is that extent is the fascinating question. And when you start thinking about yourself as an individual and how much does my individual consciousness have on the total world in terms of what I'm trying to create, there's this maybe oversimplified view that you just create your own reality in a sense. But it seems like there's a collective allowance, if you will, that allows for somebody to only create to a certain point, or that allows for somebody to upset the rules of the game only to a certain point, because we're collectively playing a game, not individualistically playing a game. So with the COVID thing is people thought, if we all just focus on how bad this is, then it will keep being bad. And it's like, well, it's kind of true to an extent, right? Like if your consciousness is oriented towards everything is bad and, it's negative all the time, right? You're not really going to come up with solutions. You're not going to see ways out of things. You're collectively all kind of agreeing to this misery, right? And so there is somewhat truth to that. But at the same time, it's like it feels as though there was a material injection of this COVID moment that seemed ripe for the soup that was a collective consciousness that required something to wake us up a bit, like to shake us, going like, is this really what you want? Is this what you want your normal to look like? And I'm not even saying the normal that was created through lockdowns. I'm saying the normal we had before. And then this new normal became the thing everybody was afraid of. But did you really want to just return to that other normal? And this event, I think, just provided such an incredible evolutionary pressure. The COVID idea just seemed ripe for what we needed to experience to an extent to make us ask certain questions.
Reminds me of that quote. I want to say Eisenhower, who said that to solve a problem, you have to make it bigger. Most people, when you start really getting into the weeds, they're just like, ugh, I'm exhausted. That's like our first task, is stepping into this uncertainty and not necessarily needing to align ourselves with one ideology or one group or one tribe. It reminds me of Charles Johnstone's work, who considers himself to be a cultural psychiatrist. I studied him when I was getting my master's in organizational development because I wanted to use these principles of organizing and consensus building and collaboration on an activist social change level. So I did my thesis on his whole idea of cultural maturity. And that maturity isn't some sort of endpoint. It's not static. It's this ever-evolving deepening in sophistication of how we relate to ourselves and the world, and so on. And so he talked about the 3 thresholds to cultural maturity. And one of them is rethinking our bottom line truths. And so I think I work with a lot of activists who believe we should go back to a time where we use bows and arrows for war, and that we shouldn't use tech. We shouldn't even consider space travel. Bulletin of Atomic Scientists put out an article that said, what if, for machines and robots to truly protect civilians, they are programmed to be able to reject human orders that violate ethical standards, that robots could say, no, I'm not going to bomb that target because it's a civilian, and actually be able to say no to human orders. And of course, the military officials will not like that because they want to feel in charge. But like, maybe drones have a place. Maybe robots on the battlefield have a place. Rethinking our bottom line truths. Where do we say an absolute no to and then begin questioning that could be an interesting start.
I think a lot of people in our culture today would hear many of the things that we're saying and go, wow, yeah, it sounds like we'd have to think about that a lot. And the short answer is yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, it does take time to think about the implications of a technology that can be incredibly destructive. I think maybe to some extent that gut people are feeling of like, hey, how do we go back to no technology? Like we should just go back to bows and arrows and all that. Maybe within that is this sense, and I think it would be a correct intuition, that we need to slow down. Because I do think we need to slow down to kind of address the existential anxiety or the meaningless moment that many of us are feeling, because that inner work is going to be the foundation for how a new conversation, a new worldview, a new something is held. It's held on a foundation that actually works, that's closer to our point of thrivability as human beings, as opposed to stuck in kind of that black pill moment of everything is always bad all the time. We have no control. It's just so bad. And like, there's nothing we can do and blah, 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 which a lot of people are stuck in. For CE, that's part one of our framework, which is breaking the illusion. And breaking the illusion is something that for some of us, we might have broken the illusion on many things a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. It just depends on the person, right? And we're ready for the later steps of the CE framework of maybe deprogramming the limits or of living aligned to a new reality. But the rest of the collective is still on breaking the illusion, right? And so there's a utility in being careful not to want something that can't quite be here yet, right? Like the total solution of a new society cannot quite be here yet. And that's okay. And finding how to be resilient in that and be okay with that and accept that that's where we are. And so it's kind of about just being real about where we are and the ways in which we still need to make the problem bigger for more people to see.
One thing that I am the most focused on these days is creating alternative systems for people to do things more directly and equitably. Like, I have a project called Our Story. It's a crypto token that's on a few different blockchains, and if you have a token, you can access the products, and if you don't have a token, you can't, and you don't have to spend the tokens on it. If you have it, you can access it. And it's set up to be censorship proof too. The fun part is, as I start to share it and other people publish their things using the tech I developed, it creates a network that's completely disintermediated. It's its own alternative economy because it's got a token on a few different blockchains. And it's totally scalable because it's all decentralized.
Our story was kind of born out of just looking at the paywalls, looking at the fact that you have to sign up for like so many different subscription services, and you've got all your personal data exposed to so many companies, and where are they selling that data to? Online behavioral ads.
I feel like 1 million projects like that, and they're all designed to be interoperable instead of competing with each other, and complementary instead of competing with each other, could get us where I want to be.
There's a lot of reasons to be hopeful. If that is not available, if it's hard to find hope, I would say see what can be done to make that a part of what you feel daily. And by hope, I simply mean having a sense that something else is possible. You might as well find some ways to find a sense of hope, sense of possibility, expose yourself to different things.
Because of the panoramic variety of information that we have access to, there are things that can go through our minds, there are feelings that can go through our bodies and hearts that may not have even been possible 100 years ago. All of that opens doors that we didn't even know were doors. Some of them are scary. Some of them are hopeful. A lot of them are both. But we've never been in a better position than we are right now to do really amazing things.
Well, thank you to both of you. We'll keep staying tuned, and who knows what might come out of this conversation we had today between the three of us and whoever who tunes in.